Welcome to the Tiga Tactics Podcast, a show about self-defense for civilians by civilians. We discuss all things personal protection, including martial arts, combat sports, and street combatives. Our resident martial arts nerds, MANs, include black belt in 4 different styles and co-founder of Tiga Tactics, Patrick Vuong.
What's up,
Patrick,
guys? How's it going?
yeah. The other co-founder, Dr. Conrad Bui, will not be joining us today. And so you're stuck with me, the other co-host, active duty Army Special Force soldier and champion obstacle course racing athlete, Evan Ultra-OCR man Perperis. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about Pekiti Tirsia Kali. So I'm excited about this episode because honestly, while I do practice Filipino martial arts, in Asando Kali specifically, I do not know that much about Pekiti Tirsia, so I'm excited to learn myself. So, Patrick, why don't you, let's start off with, tell us a little bit about your background on Pekiti Tirsia, and then we'll get into like what is Pekiti Tirsia.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. I started learning. We sometimes we just shorten it to Pekiti or PTK. And so I've been learning Pekiti since around 2016, I believe, if I remember correctly. So that's about 8 years, something like that. I started training under Tuhan Jared Wihangi. Tuhan means master. And he is an exceptional martial artist. He's also a police SWAT officer. He's a defensive tactics trainer. He's trained all kinds of elite units all over the world. And so I was partly drawn to Pekiti, but also drawn to the way that Jared teaches. And I can say Jared because he's not very much like us here at Tiga Tactics. We're not big on the honorifics, like you gotta call me master all the time and all this. He's a very cool, laid back dude because he's done plenty of stuff in his life, and he's smashed a lot of bad guys. So Jared, I'm drawn to the way that Jared teaches it because ultimately Pekiti is a Filipino martial art, and anybody who's trained in Filipino martial arts understands what that encompasses. And the it's an umbrella term. Filipino martial arts is an umbrella term. It's kind of like saying karate for Japanese martial arts or kung fu for Chinese martial arts. It's an umbrella term that incorporates literally hundreds of styles. But the commonality is that they all, I shouldn't say all, but most deal with bladed weapons, with sticks, with swords, with spears, with empty hand, and with some grappling. And because it's such a diverse, comprehensive system, it can get very convoluted very quickly and very complicated. And so the way that Jared teaches it is very simplistic. Not, I shouldn't say simplistic, but it's easy to understand because of his other background, which is in law enforcement and in teaching the defensive tactics and martial arts to elite units all over the world. He's been in South Korea, he's been to Europe, he's been to Brazil. He teaches all kinds of people. So that's basically how I started it.
Gotcha. So for Pekiti, what's the percentages of like empty hand, stick, and knife? Kind of give me like a breakdown of that. Of like how much you specifically for the
Right.
one. I know like every school might be different or every instructor might be different, but like what
Yes.
for you specifically, what percentages would you say you're
Yeah, I'm gonna have a disclaimer and say that I can't speak for all of Pekiti
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's so diverse and every instructor teaches it slightly different. And there are many associations, there are many Pekiti associations, and so they all have their own flavor, so to speak. But I can only speak from my own personal experience, and and so the breakdown is uh, generally knife work and stick work. So it's generally we focus on the knife work and we focus on the stick work, understanding that the stick work can also be translated as machetes or swords. Um, and there is a component of empty hand striking. Um, I would say that it's not as emphasized as much. And then there's also some grappling, some dumog or some wrestling. Also not as emphasized as much. Not necessarily because it's not as good. It's just in my experience, we haven't emphasized that. Not that it's not effective, you know what I mean. But I think most people when they jump into Pekiti, they're looking for the blade stuff. They're looking for the stick stuff because that's that's what's sexy.
Yeah, that's what it's known for. That's what it's known for. Like,
Right, that's what it's known for. Yeah, you can, you I don't want to get too crazy into the man stuff, the martial arts nerd stuff, but you can kind of argue that once you start to get the empty hand stuff or wrestling stuff, they all kind of look the same. Like the way that people box, pretty similar. Whether you're talking Muay Thai, boxing, karate, kung fu. Yeah, sure, there's stylistic differences, but ultimately, a straight punch is a straight punch, and a round punch is a round punch, right? And there's only just variation on that. And then with wrestling, same thing. Like you've got Chinese wrestling, you got Greco-Roman wrestling, you've got catch wrestling, you got jujitsu, judo. It's all, there are many, many differences, but when you kind of broadly look at it, they all kind of look the same. And so I would say what makes Pekiti different is the way that we handle the blade and we handle the stick. And so, yeah, that's why most people emphasize those two areas of training.
yeah, I like studying different styles that have emphasis on different ranges of combat. I think that helps make you well-rounded, right? So for me, for grappling, it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I know like wrestlers that come into the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym, a lot of times they are very hard to control because they're used to a lot of that top
Mhm.
pressure and like explosive movements. So
Right.
I totally get what you're saying about. And then yeah, striking is striking, right? Like if I'm trying to punch you in the face and take you down, typically is
Right.
the goal of most of it. So
Right.
let's say I feel like most people when they train bladed art or stick based art, they basically there's not like, oh, there's 30 Kali schools in my area. Let me see which one is the best. It's usually like, well, there's one Kali school, so that's where I'm going.
Right. Right.
Unless you live in like a major city, like New York City or something.
Mhm.
So hypothetically, let's say we live in a major city and there are all different Kali schools around with Filipino martial arts schools. Um, can you like compare and contrast Pekiti versus some of the other styles? Again, based off your personal experience, your knowledge, and
Yes.
your specific lineage slash teacher.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So, again, broadly speaking, like if you again, a disclaimer, right? If you take a person who's never had any Filipino martial arts training and you sat them and you played them a video of 10 different Filipino martial arts styles, they'd say, that all looks the same to me. So the differences between Pekiti and other systems are very, I would say, very minute. You have to really be into it to really see the differences. But having said that, because I know, Evan, you train in kind of like an Inosanto blend poly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so you can kind of see the differences because you're already in the art. You know how certain things are done, and then when you see Pekiti guys doing it, it's like, oh wow, that's different. Not like crazy unusual, but I'll give you an example. In Pekiti with our knife stuff, we used a jab. We used the jab. Uh, we use it in reverse grip or forward grip, but generally, if you did like a silhouette of a Pekiti guy and all you saw was this black silhouette, if he did the jab with a knife in reverse grip, he would be standing a certain way. And you would know, oh, that's a Pekiti guy. Versus if he was Intosano or Arnis or Balintawak, they might throw it and they all kind of look somewhat similar. But when a Pekiti guy throws that jab, it looks very specific. And actually, I would say that it kind of looks like Kung Fu. And so if people who are listening can kind of picture it, you're standing on 2 feet, then if you're right-handed, you'd have the knife in reverse grip in your right hand. You'd stand on your right leg, pick up your left leg so that you can lean more to your right and reach
uh,
out with that jab to your right side. And the idea is, number one, it's kind of a surprising angle. Number two is you get a little bit more reach, and there's a bunch of other reasons why you would throw a jab in that particular manner. But when you see someone doing a jab in that way, okay, that's a Pekiti guy.
gotcha. Interesting. So for your from your Pekiti background, training, how much of that did you end up pulling into when you developed some of the Tiga tactics, combatives slash knife work that's within the Tiga tactics program?
Right, right. Well, when this is a crazy question, and it could get very long because unfortunately Conrad is not here. He's my cousin and my co-founder, uh, and and I mentioned it'd be crazy long because between the two of us, we have more than 60 years of experience. Uh, I have the equivalent of 4 black belts, and he has the equivalent of, I believe, now 9 or 10
Did he
black
squeeze
belts.
one or two more in?
Yeah, he squeezed 1 or 2 more recently.
What when I got my first one, I sent him a message and a picture, and I was like only 7 more. I'm catching you.
Right. Yes. So he collects black belts like, we collect toys, like, Star Wars toys. Like it's ridiculous. But
I do have a good Star Wars toy collection. That's true.
yes, the reason why I said it's a crazy long answer is because we have so many experiences with different knife work, uh, namely just Conrad. If you remove me from the picture, that would be like 8 or 9 systems, and almost all of them are bladed. So he's he's got the Inosanto blend as well. He's got the Kuntao, he's got the C lot, and all of those systems, they have blades in them. And
Mm.
so we kind of had to come together and figure out, okay, well, what's the most practical use of a blade? Whether you're using it for to defend yourself, or whether you're defending against it and you're empty-handed. And so I wouldn't say that Pekiti is a humongous part of Tiga Tactics Combatives, but that's only because no one art is a huge part of Tiga Tactics Combatives.
Yeah.
There are just so many influences. We've got the Muay Thai, we've got a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu in there, we got C-Lock concepts, we've got Jeet Kune Do concepts in there. And so in terms of how did Pekiti influence our teaching, I would say that zero pressure is a big part of it. We don't necessarily use that term when we're teaching Tiga Tactics Combatives, but I try to give credit where it's due. And so the idea of zero pressure from Pekiti is understanding that, let's say a bad guy is about to sucker punch you. They they cock their hand back, and then they fire that huge looping haymaker. When they connect with your head, that's 100%. But when they cock it back, it's 0. And so the idea is that you want to apply pressure on them either as close to 0 as possible. So the moment they cock back, that's when you want to counterattack, or
Mm.
you want to engage them, you want to crash them. Or you let them expend their energy, they throw the punch, they reach 100%, you dodge it or you move back, and they start to retract their hand. And then again, they kind of return back to 0, so to speak. And that's when you would crash them, pressure them, trap them. And so we use the zero pressure concept in Tiga Tactics Combatives as well. Whether it's our own punch defense, or whether it's, say, the impact weapon defense program where someone's attacking you with a baseball bat or a club. We use the term all in or all out. So if someone has a baseball bat and they're pulling back to swing at you, you either want to smash into them as quickly as possible so that they can't actually swing through, or you let them swing around, miss you, and then you crash them.
Yeah, I really like that all in, all out. Trying to get close to 0 concept. I think it's easy to remember, easy to understand, and
Mm-hmm.
even if you're teaching a kid, so I think that's easy for them to grasp that knowledge. Um,
Yes.
so with martial arts, right? Martial and art, right? So there's a combative, application portion, and there's an art portion of that. And I know as systems that have been around for a long time, I feel like they tend to start off very combative, and then they just kind of slowly drift more into the art side. One, because
Right.
people get bored and they want more
Right.
drills and they want more techniques. Two, skill level gets higher, so you have to start countering the higher skill level with your training
Right.
partners. And then, like, three, right, at the end of the day, a lot of martial arts, at least in America, are businesses, right? So if I teach
Mm-hmm.
you the whole system in a single day, now I've got nothing to teach you, and there's no reason for you to come back.
Right.
So how much, for again, talking your personal experience, like what's the breakdown of, like, do you feel like really combative, applicable stuff compared to like art and flow drills and attribute development type stuff like that in Pekiti?
Yeah, I would say that, first off, that Pekiti is still a martial art, and so it has all the great benefits of being a martial art, but it also has all the cons, of which you speak of, the idea of like getting it more complicated and convoluted and things like that. So I'm not going to say it's the best martial art ever, because there's no such thing as the best martial art ever. It's just what's best for you at that moment.
That's true.
There are some things to keep in mind that regardless of whether it's Pekiti or any other FMA system, Filipino martial arts system, there's going to be plenty of art to it. It's very artistic. It's very cultural. It's meant for self-expression, not so much the martial or the fighting or the combat. So having said that, I would say that I chose Pekiti partly because I feel it's a little bit more martial than some of the other Filipino martial arts.
Hmm.
I'm not going to name any systems because I don't have any. I have
People
many
get real
friends
sensitive. People get real sensitive when
Oh
you
yeah,
start poking holes in their systems and their belief. Yeah.
yeah. It's very much like, say, religion, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, your religion doesn't have the truth. Oh my God, what? And it starts this whole war, but literally in some cases. But
It's
but in
true.
terms of Pekiti, I would say that it's a little bit more combat, a little bit more martial than some of the other Filipino systems that I've seen. Because in some of the other systems, they get real hung up on, we've got 12 angles, we've got 16 angles, we've got 18 angles, we've got 26 angles, we've got 100 flow drills, we've got 15 weapons. And I would say that the good instructors of Pekiti, they recognize that, but they don't emphasize that in Pekiti. They say, okay, this is you want to learn the whole system? We're going to teach you the whole system, including all the fluff. But this is what you want to emphasize. And so that's why I was really drawn to Jared, because he's very much like that. He's like, here's the whole system, but this is really what you need in a life and death situation. And I'll give you an example. So what he did, he teamed up with his instructor, who is Grandmaster Leo Gahe. He's basically the founder of Pekiti as we know it. It was a family system that he basically brought from the Philippines. And they teamed up together because of Jared's police background. He said, hey, let's teach it in a slightly more simplified manner. And so that became known as the Tri-V method of Pekiti Tirsia. It's just a way of teaching Pekiti to tactical people, police and military. And eventually that became a civilian that eventually became much more popular with civilians, and so that's how I kind of came into it, is because sure, they taught to police units and military, but a lot of civilians loved it too, and so they continued to teach civilians this, what was initially meant just for tactical groups. And the first three angles that you learn, I'm sorry, the first like few movements in terms of attacks, you don't learn all 12 angles. Most Filipino martial arts systems have 12 angles. In Tri-V, they break it down into threes. So you'll have the 5 basic angles, which is basically, if you pictured an X in the sky or the X in front of you, that's 4 angles plus a forward thrust. That's the 5th angle. So you teach those 5 basic angles, super simple. And then you'll have 3 downward angles, which are basically just angle 1 and angle 2, but done slightly different. And then you have 3 upward angles, which is basically what we would call angle 3 and angle 4. And so everything's a little bit more simplified, rather than, okay, you've got to memorize 12 angles and you got to know how to do it in the right sequence, and you got to do this. So they kind of stripped it down to make it a little bit more incremental, which is easier to memorize, which is then easier to practice.
I love it. I really like simplicity, again, not only because of my job in the military, which often involves teaching soldiers in a very compressed timeline, but also it's just easy to remember. And one of the things that I really liked about the EDC knife course, the seminar I went to with you guys a couple of years ago, and then now you've got an online program for it as well. You go over angles of attack in that, and you're like, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you can do stab to slash, you can do slash to stab, you can do one hand, you can do other hand, you can do 2 hands, you can do alternating, and it was like, oh, if I know these very, like, a couple of basic simple angles, I can literally develop a training plan based off that and keep myself busy for months with just the simple angles
Yes.
of attack. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate that about Tiga tactics, and it sounds like I feel like that concept, and then also obviously teaching things in threes.
Yes.
I feel like, yeah, you've pulled some of that, I guess, for at least from my perspective, into the Tiga Tactics brand.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I think the idea of, think in the 21st century, there's so many ways to teach now. Pedagogy is a really big thing. Whereas back in the day, you think about martial arts, there's really just one way to do it, and that was whatever that master said. He said, we're going to learn it this way. This is the way that we taught, and then that got passed down to his students, and those students passed it down to theirs. But they never had any reason to argue with him because they didn't have any evidence to argue with him. There's no TV, and then definitely no internet, so they couldn't show a video of like two people fighting saying, wait, but master, look at this video, it doesn't work. They just did it because that's what their master told them to do. And so with guys like Jared who have real life experience, it helps to have them provide their input to make things simpler. Again, simple doesn't necessarily mean bad. Simple also doesn't mean easy. It's still hard to do. But when it's simplified, people learn it faster, and then they are able to adapt in a life and death situation. And I think that's really key. And that's what we try to do in Tiga Tactics Combatas, which is keep it caveman simple, because in a life and death situation, all your fine motor control is going to go out the window.
Yeah. Yeah, I've really enjoyed learning. Again, I don't train Pekiti. I do train Kali. I've enjoyed learning all the flow drills and the footwork and range estimation, and I feel like there's just a ton of benefits. But we'll talk about this more on a future episode. I've also enjoyed learning that simultaneously while I'm learning the combative stuff. So the stuff from Tiga Tactics specifically, and then I've gotten into like obscure, I guess they're kind of obscure, like criminal based systems that are more modern developed in like kind of the last 15, 20 years, Medusa,
Right.
Western Piper methods and stuff like that. So
Right.
um, I've just found, I find the bladed arts really interesting, and Pekiti sounds like something, if I have the opportunity to train it, I would be interested in kind of exploring that world some more from your descriptions of it.
Yeah, and like I said before, there are many instructors and many associations. They all have a certain flavor in which they teach. And in my opinion, I've there are some who are better than others, but for the most part, and again, I'm being biased because I
Yeah.
practice and I teach Pekiti. I feel it's a little bit better than other Filipino martial arts systems. And I
Okay.
know a lot of my friends are gonna be like, "Oh, wow, how dare you say that?" And again, it's not to denigrate any other FMA system because they're all great. I mean, man, FMA's badass. You've got all these weapons, you've got all these applications that work really well. But I'd say Pekiti has a little bit of an edge because there's less emphasis on finesse. There's less emphasis on complicated flow drills. And don't get me wrong, there are some pretty complicated flow drills as well. But there's less emphasis on finesse, on precision, on being fancy, and it's more about hitting the person, hitting your opponent as hard and as fast as you can over the head with this wooden stick. And it just happens to be really so beautiful when done at the highest levels. But the way that is taught to me is like, forget all this fancy trapping on the inside, blah blah blah, all this other, and then multiple 10 steps to finally get to the killer shot. It literally like when you start in the basic level, there's only three combinations or only three moves, and the third move is always a finisher. You're always trying to
Mm.
kill them. There's no like, it's not like ba 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 ba. We're talking like music. It's not like multiple beats consistent. It's just 1, 2, 3 dead. 1, 2, 3 dead. 1, 2, 3 dead. Okay, next 1, 2, 3 dead. You're dead now. You're dead. Now you're dead. That's kind of the way that it was taught to me. It's like you want it to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, especially with the research Tiga Tactics done, and what we've seen. A lot of times people are untrained. So purely having an aggressive response not only may have you win the situation, but it will strongly deter someone from continuing the attack, right?
Right.
predators are looking for easy victims. So
Yes,
I
absolutely.
like it. I like it. Sounds cool. Are there ranks? Right. I know you said there's obviously like an instructor level like Tuhan, but is there are there multiple ranks in Pekiti or for your specific?
Yes, there are multiple ranks. Every teacher will have slightly different terminology for them. And I'm not going to say them because I cannot pronounce them. It's not Tagalog, I believe it's different dialect. But each rank has I'm sorry, each level there are different ranks. So there
How many
are
levels are we
student
talking
ranks.
here? Just for approximation here.
Student wise, I believe there's three. They're based everything on three. Surprise. It is based on the triangle, so a lot of things are in three. So there are three student levels. Um, there may be, depending on who's teaching, there may be three within those three levels. Like
Mhm.
intermediate stuff, kind of like stripes for a
Yeah.
belt. Uh, but there are three student levels, and then you become uh, basically like an assistant instructor or apprentice instructor, and then there are multiple levels after that,
Of
and
instructorship.
that's what I always yeah of instructorship after that. So I always thought that was really cool, um, because it's flipped in here in America. In America, let's take Taekwondo, right? Like Taekwondo is a Korean system, but when it came to America, man, now you have this massive rainbow. You've got white belt with multiple stripes. You got yellow belt with multiple stripes, orange, green, blue, purple, red, brown, all the colors under the sun, and all these stripes. So your student levels, there might be like 30 student levels. And then of course you get to black belt, you might go from first degree all the way to, say 5, 9, 10 degrees, depending on your system. Every
Yeah.
system is slightly different. Uh, but in Pekiti it's different. It's flopped. So you're a student, uh, but if you're really good, you won't be a student for very long. You'll become an instructor, but then it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg. Like once you crack that level, man, there's all these other levels after that, and that's when you truly become a real martial artist or true Pekiti player.
Hmm.
Um, and I always like that because I based on that I realized, oh, this is not a money making scheme, and they actually want you to become very competent quickly.
Gotcha. The like you mentioned it. At the end of the day, it's a business in America, right? So the
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
colors of all the different belts is a good marketing strategy.
Oh yeah.
I was
Eh,
always taught when I first entered martial arts that a black belt is essentially a master of the basics, but like that's it. It basically means like you know how to do the basics well. So I think the way you described Bikini, although like the karate progression I used had a lot more ranks. I think we had ultimately 10 steps before you hit black belt. The concept is still the same. You're becoming a master of the basic movements, and then from there you can unlock the more complicated stuff and develop from there.
yes. Exactly. Exactly. And not to say anything bad about Taekwondo. I mean, Conrad is a fifth degree black belt in Taekwondo. I have seen him kick ass. He has kicked my ass in sparring. So it is a serious system. So not I'm not trying to bash Taekwondo. I love Taekwondo too. I wish I could kick like many Taekwondo players, and unfortunately I cannot. But it was more for me. It's more about the like you said, understanding that it is a business and that it is very much an American business, and for kids especially, it's
Yeah,
a belt system is good for kids because
100%.
they need that reinforcement.
It's good for
They
adults too. I know
it is, yeah.
Brazilian Jiu Jitsu always be like, we only have four belts. It's like, yeah, but you have four stripes within each belt. So, like,
Right.
so like, come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. There's 16 ranks basically
yeah.
when
Yes,
in that
exactly.
first part.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long would it take? They say like, according to Google, right, it takes an average of whatever, 5 years or 3 to 5 years for Taekwondo belt, black belt, 5 to 7 for karate, and like 10 or more for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt. How
Mhm.
long would you say, someone training 2 to 3 times a week, Pekiti Tirsia, how long would it take someone to reach instructor level or the first level of instructorship ish?
It would probably also take about 5 years.
Okay.
Uh, maybe a little bit faster if you're really good and you have previous training, maybe a little bit longer if it's your first system. But generally, I would say five, 4 to 6 is probably more accurate.
Okay.
So it's not a terribly long time. You do have to be dedicated, and put in the work to be really good at it. It's not like I said, it's a simple system. That doesn't mean it's an easy system.
Hmm. Yeah, so the concepts, it's always easier to get something in concept than conceptually than it is to actually put it into application against a pressure tested individual and sparring and stuff like that. And that
Right.
5 year goes back to the very first time I interviewed you a couple years ago. You were like, "Yeah, it takes about 5 years to get good at anything," and I've stolen that phrase and I use it all the time because it's really
Right.
true. And
It is.
because in 5 years, most of the people that started won't be there anymore, right? So you
Mhm.
are like the fact that you physically showed up, and even if you were putting in a medium to low level of effort, you'll still probably be far ahead of most of the class or most of the other people, because other people simply don't last. They don't have the persistence, the
Mhm.
consistency to perform. So
Right.
yeah,
That is very true. Not just in Pekiti, but in any physical endeavor. I'm thinking about all the other systems I have black belts in, and I was pretty much the last man standing. Like I might have had in Kempo Karate, I might have had a teammate who was like brown belt when I got my black belt. But if I remember correctly, when I started off at white belt, there were probably like 10 of us. And by the time I got my black belt, there were nobody left.
yep,
Uh,
same. I've same exact experience. I was like one of 8 or 9, and then I
mhm.
was the last one left. Fast forward a couple of years, I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah. So, and then
Yeah. So there,
even my the martial arts school I train at now, I'd say there's about 5 people that are consistent, and maybe even a little bit less if I remove the people who are instructors or related to the instructor. And then there's a constant stream of rotating other 5 to 10 people that last 3 months to a year at a
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
So,
Again, like as Conrad would say, it's persistence goes a long way.
yeah,
You put in, he always recommends training at least 3 times a week. But even if you only get once a week, you're still way better off than the person who quit. The
yeah,
person who quit will never progress. But the person who goes at least once a week, preferably 3 times a week, they're always going to get better every week. They might not see it themselves because they're going through the struggle. They're trying to learn new things. They're trying to incorporate what they already know. And so it always seems like a struggle. But when you look back 5 years later, you're like, oh wow, I'm actually kind of good at this.
yeah. The changes are sometimes microscopic, and sometimes it feels like I mean, I've through running and obstacle course racing and other endurance sports. Sometimes it feels like it's like, well, I'm wasting my time because I've seen no improvement over the last 2 months. But then you go back in time 2 years and you're like, oh no, I'm way better than I was 2 years ago. So
Mhm. Oh
um,
yeah.
sometimes it just takes a more of a macro review to zoom out and figure out, remember how far do you come. I know that's the one thing I like about Facebook and Instagram. Occasionally it'll like be like, on this day 3 years ago, here's something you did, right? And
Right.
sometimes it's got old videos of me doing like obstacles, and I
Yeah.
watch them and I'm like, ugh, why did I post that? It's like I'm embarrassed by that now. It's
Right.
like
Right.
I can't believe I posted this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I know exactly how you feel.
yeah. All right. Well, we're going to start wrapping it up. Again, this was kind of a different type of episode. We only had one of us on, or one of us besides, well, two people out of the three. And we kind of started diving into some of the more nuanced martial arts. So we're going to do this with a couple of the other martial arts that Patrick, myself, and Dr. Conrad have a background in. And we'll kind of mix these in addition to all the slogan episodes and like the more focused on the Tiga tactics courses. Any final shout outs you want to give, Patrick, before we take off?
Yeah, I just want to thank Tuhan Jared Wihangi for being an awesome instructor. He's such a cool, laid back guy, but he's definitely earned his stripes. As a cop, he's had to handle some pretty dangerous situations. Um, but he's such a laid back, cool instructor. Obviously, all of my Pekiti mentors had along the way. There's a lot of them, so I can't name them all, but you guys are all awesome. Uh, that's what I like about our group of Pekiti guys is they almost all have a very wide, diverse background. They have multiple black belts probably, but they're all very cool. There's no ego in our system. There are no knuckleheads usually. Everybody's just, come on, we're fighting with knives and sticks, so there's no room for ego. Everybody's gonna get thumped in sparring. Everybody's gonna get those training scars, and it's just about how can we help each other get better. So I want to thank all the whole Pekiti Tirsia Tactical Association. I want to thank Rounders MMA at Fullerton for letting me teach our Pekiti classes out of there. Thank you, Coach Joe, for allowing me to do that. So, and of course, thank you to Conrad for being my first Kali instructor. He taught me the incidental blend, and that really laid the groundwork for a lot of my movements. And thank you to Evan for doing this podcast.
Yeah, another. I learned a lot in this episode. Another good episode. As you know, I love bladed art. So anytime I can learn a little bit more, I'm always interested. And for any of our listeners, again, check out the show notes down below for links to myself, Patrick, and Conrad's social media links, as well as links to Tiga Tactics suite of online courses. I've looked at some of Tricom's, which Jared Wahangi's online courses before. I haven't quite pulled the trigger on any of them. They are kind of expensive, so I kind of, but I am interested. So, anyone give me a free entry, I'd love that. Just kidding. But seriously though.
Yeah.
Okay. If Jared needs any articles written, let me know and I can cook them up. All right. We're gonna get going. Again, this was a kind of a busy month, so our second episode pushed out kind of late. We'll go back to more 2 evenly spaced podcasts next month. So yeah. Anything else, Patrick, before we go?
No, just check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and stay alert, stay humble, stay kind.
All right, we'll catch you guys in the next episode.